But you got to make it.
That's a bad philosophy. I feel like this is like the financial aid path.
All right, so folks, chapter 6. And honestly, everything that we've been doing up until this section has been really gearing us towards getting here. Okay. From now on, this class will basically be about percentages 99.9% of the time. Okay. So the idea is that from here on out, we are basically going to be doing every type of percentage that you could possibly dream of in the business world. Okay. And part of my job is to make sure that you are comfortable with percentages in all of those different settings.
Okay? You've got a lot of work to do.
Yes, I know. That's why we've got 9, whatever it is, like 14 more weeks of this stuff.
Nobody sits here and dreams about percentages. That's just
You have to know percentages.
You guys don't dream about percentages? I mean, think about if your investments were earning like 20% interest. I mean,
where are you investing?
well, the drug cartel area, right? I mean, come on.
That's where I put my
My
money.
high school used to have an investment club that like a bunch of like the popular kids were in. I was just sitting in my
those rich high schools.
I was in Craig in Waynesville.
I don't know.
That's not one of the rich ones. So.
No.
But
But that's like what we all did. We all sat in one of our business teachers' class in investment club.
yeah, trying to earn as much as you can, right?
I mean, at least it looks good on a resume. But
Not for high school.
Oh, come on, you never know. All right, so you guys probably know a little bit about percentages, right?
I know how to tip.
That's good. Tip what? How?
Yep.
no, that's mean.
So you guys know that that statement is a true statement, right?
Yes.
You do know it's true. What am I going to ask though?
How do we know it's true?
Even worse, folks. I'm 5. Remember? So my question is why? And said like a proper 5-year-old.
What are you, an angry
So if you took
Aren't all 5-year-olds angry?
if you took 1 as a whole number and times it or divided it by 1/2, it would equal 0.5 or 50%.
Whoa, there's way more going on than that.
If you have 100 snickerdoodle cookies,
I have 100.
and I take half of them,
Well, I don't see any cookies up here.
and I take
Yeah,
half
some
of them, how many are left?
Half.
If you add another 1 to the one on top to make it 2,
Yeah.
that equals 100%.
How do I know that that's 100%? Okay, so here's another question. Why is this true, folks? Why is that true?
Because 1 over 1.
Because someone said
Because
it
it
was.
just is.
And now
But why? Explain it so that someone who is in 2nd or 3rd grade, just learning
That's
about
what
percentages,
pays you
gets
to
it.
do that.
No, I'm teaching adults. You guys have to teach the kids.
My
That's not teaching
snickerdoodle
kids.
things, a kid would have been like, okay, there's 50 snickerdoodles left. That's 50%.
Well, that's 50, but it's not 50%. Why is it 50%? How do you explain to somebody that this is a true statement?
We're not. You have to divide 1 by 2, and that's the answer you get on the calculator.
No, you get 0.5. You don't get 50%.
And then times that by 100.
But why? Where is times by 100 up here?
Because you're taking it out of the 100%.
Ooh, now you're getting somewhere. Now you're getting somewhere. Where do you get this out of 100 magic? I don't see out of 100 anywhere.
Because the dividing bar is out of, or whatever.
Well, no, that would be 1 out of 2.
Alright, never mind.
But you're on the right track, Megan. I mean, where does the out of 100 come from, folks?
Because all of something is 100%.
That's what the percent sign means. That's the key, right? If you say that the percent sign is just a way of writing the phrase out of 100, you will then make this meaningful to everybody, right? So 50 out of 100 equals 1/2. And again, technically, you have to remember, what does the phrase out of mean? So division, and so you can say, hey, 50 over 100 equals 1/2, and then you can explain regularly how do you tell someone that this is true.
Because that's just how life works.
Life is always a snickerdoodle, right? And then you would explain, yes, you can simplify this fraction. And again, remember, folks, that the way you simplify a fraction is dividing by 1 written cleverly, right? This is divided by 50 over 50. 1. And that's what simplifies it down to 1 over 2. All right? So, again, please remember that that's what the percent sign is. It means out of 100. And it's really just a lazy way of writing that phrase. Okay? Now, the other thing about it, folks, is do you ever use the number next to the percent when you do calculations? I mean, if someone was to ask you, calculate what 50% of something is, would you use the number 50?
No.
No, what would you use?
Just divide by 2.
You would divide it in half, because of course Greg over here likes fractions better than he likes whole numbers, right, Greg?
Sure.
Of course you do. In fact, all of you would do the same thing. If you were asked to take 50% off of something, you would take half of it.
Because it's easier.
Because it's easier and because you like fractions better than whole numbers, right? Yeah, you guys would much rather use this number than you would use this 50 crap thing, right?
It's just harder to find the 50%.
No, I probably use the 50%.
No, you would take half of it.
No.
Yes,
when
you
I leave
would.
a tip at the restaurant, I don't go.
Well, but that's not 50%. You don't tip at 50%. You tip at 15 to 20%, right?
You tip 15%.
Unless they're
Yeah,
extra
of course.
weenie.
But again, this is the idea. When you tip 10%, what do you guys do? You just move the decimal. Exactly. You take 1/10 of it. Yes, exactly. And again, what you wind up doing is you use a fraction and not the number 10. Right? You don't actually use 10 and 10%. You divide or multiply by 1/10. You end up using the fraction. So all of this, you guys hate fractions crap? No way, right? And likewise, right? What else am I going to throw up here?
I would just multiply by 0.25.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, I would.
That's a blatant lie.
That's how I
That's a
did
blatant
it.
lie.
I go, what
If you were
is
taking 25% of something, you did not multiply
That's
by
why I find
0.25.
percentages.
I don't pull out 1/4.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
No.
Yes, you
No,
do.
I do that.
Nope.
Because a fourth. If you take 25% of 40, you immediately go. It's the
It's
fourth of
also
40.
0.25 of a decimal.
I know, but you don't multiply.
I do.
You can lie all you
I
want.
do.
That's fine. That's fine. I appreciate your ability to try and lie, but I know you don't. That's okay.
So I make frames at Michael's.
Uh-huh.
So when we type it in, we don't type in 11 and 1/4. We type it in 11 and 0.25.
Thank you.
Oh, but the computer switches it back to 1/4.
Ooh, isn't that nice? That's awesome.
No.
Yes, it's great.
No.
It's good to be able to go back and forth, right? That's the idea, though, folks, is that one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is to take a percentage and rewrite it as the two different ways that you might use it, okay? Now, I agree that you may multiply by 0.25, but again, the key, though, is you are still converting it to its decimal representation, right? So yes, I don't necessarily disagree with you that you may not take 25% and convert it to 0.25 and multiply. But do you actually multiply by 25? No, 0.25, right? So you actually do the conversion every time, okay? Because we don't actually ever use this number. It's just a way of trying to make it look cooler and not have decimals or fractions floating around there if at all possible.
Plus my
Right.
phone calculator doesn't
It does this. Mine does.
I've never, I guess.
You gotta flip
Hard
it
enough.
Yeah, there's this little arrow on the side and it has percentage button.
You have an iPhone?
No, I like
I have an iPhone.
You have to flip
Again,
it.
regardless though, you have to be able to go back and forth,
Yeah, there's a
right?
whole other calculator.
I mean, if you have a percent sign on your calculator, that's great, but how do you go back to a percentage from a regular number, right? You got to be able to go both ways, right? So let's be safe about it though. How do you convert 6% into a decimal? Learning about your calculators or phones, as the case may be. Now, how do you figure this out, folks? How do you get from 6 to 0.06? Move the decimal point 2 slots. What are you really doing? Dividing by 100. Yes. Okay, so please be careful with this. When you are removing a percent, divide by 100. Now, how do you write this as a fraction?
6 over 100.
6 over 100, yeah. Except you wouldn't leave it like that, right, Greg?
I would.
Oh, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't. What would you rewrite it as? Yeah. 3 over 50. Okay, so please, again, when you get to this question on the test and you're asked to write fractions, if it can be simplified, please simplify it, all right? So, let's suppose that I'm a football player, and
It could happen, right? It could, maybe.
You're the ace guard.
yes, I'm the kicker. That's absolute. I'm the guy that holds the ball up for the kicker. That's what I do. All right, so, if I'm a football player, folks, what do I do every game? I give 110%. Because that's what football players always say, right?
Well, really, you can't. Because bench warmers do that too.
Of course! Yes! We have to bring out the water really, with experience and power. So how do you write 110% as a decimal? 1.1. All right. And if you want to include the 0 at the end of it, it's okay. If you don't, you don't have to. That's fine. Either one. And how do I write this as a fraction? 1 and 1/10. Exactly. Read the number the proper way, and it all works just fine. All right?
Marshall, I don't think you're being excited enough for morale.
What? They're having a blast.
One guy.
I don't think they hear you.
Yeah, no, one guy's asleep.
He is not out.
All right, so what?
Now they're laughing at him. I don't think we can hear them.
I have the sound pretty low from their side to us.
Oh.
They do.
All right.
They're out here.
So how about 0.4%, folks?
Yeah, what if they're asking questions?
And we can't hear them ask questions.
They raise hand, and then we ask.
But you have to look at the screen for that.
I'm looking at the screen right there. Okay, so 0.4%, folks. How do you write that as a decimal?
0.004.
0.004. Please make sure you have the correct number of zeros on that one. Again, the decimal still hops to the left. Make sure that you put it in correctly, right? Now, what is this as a fraction?
4
1,000.
4 1,000ths?
4 2
1 250th. You can hop between 2 and 500ths and then 1 and 250ths or one step either way. Just make sure the fraction gets simplified. Alright? Not bad.
I think we should be worried about his health because that has got to be uncomfortable.
He probably worked the afternoon shift and is tired. I understand life.
Hey, I came from work.
Exactly.
Did you party hard all last night?
Oh,
That's true.
All right, so let's try another one, folks. Let's this time let's switch to the decimal. All right. Let's suppose that the decimal is 0.2. Okay, good. Why is it 20% and not 2%?
That's what 20
So
Or
the
you
decimal
multiply
times
by
plus
100.
zero.
Nobody cares about it. You care about the 0, right? But what do you do to get to the percentage, though, folks?
Multiply by 100.
Multiply by 100, right? When you get rid of the percent, you divide by 100. When you add it, you multiply by 100, or essentially move the decimal 2. Again, please be careful when you move the decimal 2, so that you give me 20% in this particular case, and not 2%. That's the possible mistake. And what is 0.2 as a fraction? All right, I'll jump right to it. Cool. All right, so not too bad, right? How about if the decimal is 0.0003?
That's when you walk out.
No, this is what you're earning in interest on your savings accounts right now, folks.
0.03.
Yeah, 0.03%, right? 0.03%. That's what the average savings account is paying interest-wise right now. 0.03. Yeah, it is crap, but it's what we have to deal with.
Right.
And how do we write this number as a fraction?
3/10,000.
3/10,000ths. Again, 4 decimal points, 4 zeros. All right, classic. Don't forget that stuff. Not bad. All right, so how about if I give you a fraction to start with, though? How do you write that as a decimal and as a percent?
I give up and leave.
0.6 is a decimal. And
0.6. How did you get 0.6 as a decimal?
30, or 3.
What did you do to figure it out?
I put it
Yes, you would. Exactly. You punch in 3 divided by 5, and it would tell you. Good. It would say, hey, it's 0.6.
60%.
And yeah, then multiply by 100 to get to your 60%. Please note, folks, that there are some questions on the homework that ask you to convert from a fraction to a percentage. It's perfectly okay to go through the decimal and then write the percent afterward. You don't necessarily have to try and do it in one step if you don't want to. Now, let's get a funky one.
Forever.
33%.
What is it again as a decimal?
0.3 repeating.
0.3 repeating, yes. Now, how do I convert that to a percent?
Round up.
Don't do any rounding, period, at all, folks. No rounding. I want the exact percentage.
33.
0.33.
So how do I write it?
0.333 with a line over it.
Exactly, right? So you would say this is 33.3 with a line over it percent, right? That is the exact percentage that you will get with 1/3 off, okay? Now, how many of you have seen this percentage ever written down somewhere?
I'm sure I
I
have.
think I have.
People try not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Very few people try to write numbers with a little bar over the decimal point. I mean, that's just weird, right?
I think
So-
it was some banking stuff.
Oh, yeah. But the bank wouldn't do this. The bank would switch to something that's nicer, just like the computer does. When you try to type in 11.25, what does it do? Makes it 11 1/4, right? Well, what would the computer convert that into as a fraction? 33 1/3%. And the reason why?
I guarantee I've never seen that.
What is 0.3 repeating, folks? 1/3, right? So how do I get rid of this 0.3 repeating? Just replace it with something that's exactly the same. Well, 0.3 repeating is just 1/3, so take the 0.3 repeating off, substitute in the 1/3. It's the same thing. Okay? It is weird, but that's what you would be doing if you were getting or having to deal with 1/3 off or 33 1/3% interest or something along those lines, because that's how it gets translated. And I guarantee you, folks, that banks, they care about that 1/3%. They care a lot about that 1/3%. Okay, so just be careful with it. Now, let's switch it around a little bit. Let's go with say 2/3. Now I'm going to expect you guys to be able to just handle this one.
You're repeating.
Okay, good. So 0.6 repeating, perfect. And what am I going to do with that percent? 66 2/3%. Or 66.6 with the bar over the 6 repeating percent. Either of those are always okay. In this class, folks, repeating decimals are not weird. They're normal.
Which one would you rather see us?
Oh, I'd rather see the fractions. Because I love fractions. You know me.
You love fractions.
I do love fractions. All right? All right, so let's do one more just to round it out before we call it a day. And this one, think about it a little bit before you try and do that last step. So what is 5/6? 0.8. Just the 3 is repeating. Okay, good. So, just the 3, right? Now, convert that to a percentage. 83, but what's the decimal after it?
3 repeating.
And what is 3 repeating? 1/3. So this is really going to be 83 1/3%. Note that it's not necessarily just always copy the fraction that you started with in order to get what your fraction is going to be, right? So be a little careful with that one just because that 5, 6 has the 8 leading into it. That's why it's not your fraction at the end of the percent. All right. So that's about as far as we got to go today, folks. We will play a little bit more with this on Tuesday, and then we will crank through generic percentage problems and word problems on the Tuesday next week.
Are you going to be over there next week?
I don't think so, no.